I hope everybody is seeing that. Thank you very much for joining our first ever Pipal Tree community Zoom meeting. As I say, I promised a short meeting, and when I get started, it's quite difficult to stop really. But I will try and restrict my talking to half an hour, and if there's any questions, perhaps maybe try and aim for sort of general questions rather than maybe ones that are specific to yourselves. If you do want to ask me something that's very specific, I'm very open to being asked questions, tomorrow or whenever. So I think just crack on. Pipal Tree, obviously a new name, new logo, new website, and this has been, I don't need to say it's been quite a year. It's been a year where we've taken quite a severe knock in terms of income, like all charities, like all organisations, like people. It's been a very tough time, and certainly this charity is looking at something like about 50% drop in income, and we've missed out quite badly, really, in some respects, because although the government has supported charities that are working locally in the UK, charities working overseas haven't benefited at all, really, from that kind of support. That said, we have enjoyed very good loyal support from supporters, and I know it's been tough for people, but people have still been incredibly generous, and that included, by the way, our relief work, when last year we fed 28,000 people in Nepal across 15 districts, and that was entirely possible just through the generosity of individuals who I think really just got it, that lockdown was tough for us, but it was an awful lot tougher for people in Nepal. And that was literally life-saving support to people like the people you see in this picture. One of the reasons for changing the name Chora Chori was that it really sort of ceased to be fit for purpose, in that Chora Chori meant children. Well, it means children. And although we very much started out as a children's charity, you just find that with time, it doesn't really work to just to focus on children. It's impossible. So, I mean, there's a case in point. You don't just feed the children in the community when there's a burgeoning famine. Equally, our work with child rape and so on. Well, you don't draw a line at 18-year-olds and say, look, we're not interested in 18-year-olds. So I think it makes more sense to have a broader remit, but perhaps have a tighter geographical focus. And what we have done is we've come to focus on southeast Nepal, where undoubtedly for me the need is greatest, and with some supporting work going on in Kathmandu. But that allows us to take on a broader range of activities, which I think is very appropriate. I think the other challenge for us has been to try and achieve more with less, which is a very tall order. But I think we've found a way of doing that, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Just to explain the Pipal tree, it's a tree that you'll see a lot of in South Asia. It's very common in Nepal. You'll see it in the centre of towns and villages. In that particular specimen there, you'll see that sort of concrete base around it. It serves as a kind of a meeting point for the community. It's also a tree that's sacred to both Hindus and Buddhists, and so it's very much a focal point. And I think for us, it not only represents our interest, our growing interest in the environment, because reforestation is a big thing in what we do now as well, but also this sense of community, this sense of engagement, and that extends also to engaging with supporters better than before, which is why we're having this Zoom meeting this evening. And just flashing up that picture very quickly, the Pipal tree is also called a Bodhi tree, and it's, as I said, sacred to Buddhists because it was underneath one of these trees that Buddha had his enlightenment. But look at the leaves above his head there. They're a very characteristic sort of heart shape, with a sort of a spiky point sticking down. These leaves are a great inspiration for for designers and for jewelers. Someone recently was spotted wearing earrings like that. Those are Pipal leaf earrings. and we'll be incorporating these leaves into our designs as well. Felicity Gibbling was due to join us this evening, but I don't think she's joined. By the way, the Pipal Tree seed, which is that little knobbly thing you see there, also very distinctive. And we're looking at incorporating that and a leaf into a bracelet design. But I'll talk about that on another occasion. So there is an inspiration there. Oh, and Felicity has just joined. Let me admit her. I don't know if you're hearing me, Felicity. I was just talking about you and how you very kindly shared that bottom picture with me, and thank you for that. The leaf also acts as a canvas. So we have a group of girls in South Nepal whom we're supporting, who are painting on these pipal leaves. And it's a wonderful thing, actually, because the girls are just painting from within. I've seen so often in Nepal, where you give kids an art project and immediately they're reaching for a book to copy something, but the girls just paint from what's within, and they paint scenes from their day-to-day lives, and you see sort of artwork like that, which is very striking. This is the so-called Maithili art style, which is indigenous to this part of South Nepal. And, and the remarkable thing about it is that in this area of Nepal, it's extreme poverty, and it's mud huts, thatched roofs, and yet in the midst of that, they have all this dazzling artistry, which is painted on the ground, it's painted on the walls, and it's a remarkable juxtaposition. We invited the girls also to paint their aspirations. So this is girls after empowerment. So you'll see a girl on the right there sitting in a moped. There's another girl sitting by a sewing machine, someone else on a laptop. So that's bringing the Maithili art into the modern age. But if you look at just there at that little sun, you'll see where we got our logo from. So we drew our inspiration from that. There was the very obvious thing of use the leaf, use the tree, but actually so many people have done that already. And we were looking for something that was a bit distinctive. And we thought that, this here not only represents the sun, but there's a sort of convergence there, which could symbolize meeting as well. And we love it. It's great. The website is I hope you've all visited it. I mean, it is a very unusual site. It is not the typical charity site of about us, our projects, etc., etc. It is written very much with the visitor in mind and the visitor's interests, and again connecting with supporters. And I think one of the things that really, I suppose, came home to me last year in the midst of all these challenges, and a lot of negativity, there were a lot of positive things as well. And it made me sort of rethink what we were doing and what was really important to me as an individual. And this here, this idea of getting resources to the point of greatest need is very important to me. Having lived in Nepal for 8 years and having seen so much money coming into the country and going to the wrong places, it's an absolute abomination. And so we're very keen to try and get the funds to where they should go, and that's one thing. The second thing is this bottom line as well, which we can increase the value of your gift through finding a match funder. Again, this is this idea of getting more from less. You may be aware that we've used the big gives very successfully over the last 3 years, where online donations automatically double in value. Well, this year we'll be doing 3 big give appeals rather than 2, and I'll talk about that right at the very end. And what we do, again, very unusually for a charity, is we say to people, don't send us money, save it up for a big give when it can double in value. And we're just trying to be a bit more strategic now about how we do our fundraising, and we say it's been very successful so far, and I'd like us to build on that success. So there is the website, and there's four main areas of interest. There's the support to vulnerable and abused children, mental health and rehabilitation, which is a continuation of what we've done in the past, and that remains very important to us. We've got the empowering girls and women, which again is something we've been doing for the last couple of years. That continues too. Community support and education, focusing on marginalised communities. I'm very, very intrigued by South Nepal and by what I've seen down there in terms of discrimination, ethnic discrimination, gender discrimination, all the violence and abuse that goes on there. And I think it's a very overlooked part of the country. I think people tend to go to Nepal and they're very focused on Kathmandu, Pokhara, the mountains, the attractive bits, but the south tends to get neglected, and that's a shame because there are so many injustices there that need to be addressed. And the final one is the environment and climate change. This evening, as I say, I can't possibly give you a comprehensive overview of everything that we're doing. And if this is a monthly meeting, there's plenty of time to talk about other things at a later date. But this evening, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things really. And the first of those is the environment. Sorry, no, before I go on to that, getting more from less. One of the other ways of doing that is by linking in with other charities. And we are working now with Little Feet, which is a very small registered UK charity. And they're helping us in supporting individual children, sort of child sponsorship type things, and providing a very valuable role, again, working in the same geographical area as we are. We've got Fashion with Heart, which is a faith-based charity. They're helping us with design of garments and bags at our production centre that we've got in Kathmandu, which I'll talk about later. We've got Her Future Coalition, which is a US non-profit, which is really, I suppose, Felicity's linked into Her Future Coalition. They're providing consultancy on jewellery design, and that's been going on for quite some time. And finally, last but by no means least, our Sansar. Sansar is the Nepali word for team. Again, it's a registered UK charity. I'm working very closely with this lady who's on the call this evening, Julia. Thank you for joining us, Julia. Julia and I have a weekly Zoom call. Both of us have a shared passion about Nepal, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this. I think both of us have a common feature in that we don't see the country through rose-tinted spectacles by any stretch of the imagination. And we're very aware, from both of us having lived in the country, just how things from time to time don't work terribly well, and how things can go wrong, and how you try and navigate those problems. So Julia and I are working very closely at the minute on several areas. One of those is the setting up of a new boys' shelter, girls' shelter in South Nepal that'll provide refuge to vulnerable kids and also the victims of child abuse. Now, I don't want to talk about that any further this evening because time includes that. The environment and climate change. Here you have a woman pictured last year planting a sapling. This work is going on in the south of the country. Just as a little bit of background on the climate, Nepal's quite a remarkable country because the person who's standing in this picture is in South Nepal. He's looking north to the Himalayas, and you're looking across a distance there of about 200 kilometers. So in that distance, you go from somewhere that's totally flat and just above sea level, and to the highest place on Earth. So you've got quite a remarkable range of ecosystems and all the rest of it. But the southern part of the country is essentially paddy fields, very flat, very hot, very sticky, very unpleasant, which is probably why a lot of the organisations head for the hills rather than for the plains. Those mountains, that picture was taken last year, and as per what happened in the west, the air became very clean in Nepal, and it was quite rare to actually be able to see right across the country like that. But what we're seeing now is that the mountains are turning brown. I know that mountain very well because I used to walk my dogs down the lane, and that mountain was out in front of me. In Nepal at the minute, it's rated as being the 9th most affected country by climate change. The temperature is increasing by 0.6 degrees centigrade every decade. We're seeing the glaciers melting. There was a hotelier on a press article last week who was lamenting that people weren't coming to his hotel in the mountains anymore to play in the snow because there was no snow. I think he was perhaps missing the point a bit. because I mean this is what they call our third pole, the world's third pole, the Himalayas. If we lose the glaciers and we lose the water supply that fuels the rivers, the impact upon the whole region is going to be devastating, and it's happening right now before our very eyes. And that's why, for me, while all of the things that we're doing is very, very important, this for me is top priority, especially in this year of all years. It is very, very scary indeed. And of course, we're linked into that. We're seeing changes in weather patterns. And when I first went to Nepal to live there in 2004, you could set your watch by the monsoon. It would start on the 15th of June. It would end on the 15th of September, give or take a day. And now the weather patterns are all over the place, and we're seeing floods. And this picture was taken in the floods of 2017, again in South Nepal. And we just had some really harrowing images of like this father releasing his dead baby's body into the floodwaters. There was nowhere to bury the child. Heartbreaking. I mean, 143 people died in those floods, but it's getting to become a very regular occurrence, and this is the shape of things to come. And you may have seen in the news reports a couple of weeks back a terrible disaster in North India, where essentially a bit of a glacier broke off and just went barreling down a valley, sweeping everything in front of it. We're going to see more of that. We're going to see glacial lakes breaking their banks, and it's awful, really awful. Pipal Tree's approach to the sort of climate change environment. This is the reforestation project that we launched last year, and a huge thanks to Gemma and Chris McGough. Gemma's on the call this evening for funding 2/3 of this massive 2.5-year project. The remaining third coming from the Nepal government Department of Forestry. Essentially, we're reforesting 32 hectares of a community forest, and which has a huge range of benefits, not just in terms of biodiversity and carbon sequestration and all those kind of things, but also giving employment to people as you see them there preparing the ground for planting saplings and actually nurturing the saplings. Looking up, they've planted 29,500 saplings in that area, and this forest will ultimately provide livelihoods as well from forest products. Things like essential oils and plant fibers and so on. But it's also, the forest is part of the safety net for people in these communities. Like last year when there was the lockdown and so on, and there was no food, people were going into the forest looking for forest products to eat. So the forest and the community, those two things go absolutely hand in hand. So that's rural reforestation. Once this project is completed in 2 years from now, I've got another project where I'm going to try and create a wildlife corridor, which I'll not talk about this evening. Urban reforestation, we're starting that this year. Again, I'm not going to talk about it this evening, but this is quite a big thing now also in this country. It was in the news the other day where they're looking at how you might create so-called tiny forests in an urban environment. And this is basically an area the size of a tennis court that you can turn into a really dense forest in land that's just not being used for any other purpose. And this is what we'll be doing this year. And I will talk about this in the next my next talk. Something else I'm not going to talk about this evening, but beyond mentioning it, organic fertilizer. Again, what a big step to go from being a children's charity to looking at how we might produce organic fertilizer. I'm working very closely with Julia on this, and Julia's got a couple of friends who are academics who develop this stuff. And essentially, Julia and I are working on developing a school in this region where you see these people working, a school that will serve the children from the untouchable community, and that school development isn't just a case of building classrooms. It's actually looking at how you fund the running costs, and we're trying to fund those running costs through the sale of organic fertilizer and other forest products. And this is how our projects all overlap one with the other, and that if you can get to sustainability, you're on a real winner. And the final thing is advocacy. That's linked to our urban reforestation work that I'll talk about in our next meeting. This is really important this year with the COP26 climate change conference in November. I hope we can make a very strong statement from Nepal about just the dangers that we're now not even facing. We're right in the middle of it, and there we are. I'm going to shift focus very, very dramatically to our second area of interest, empowering girls and women, which has been going on now for a couple of years. In October, we set up a social enterprise, a local organisation called Lily's Leaves, and as the name might suggest, very sort of green credentials in due course. We're looking at how we might develop forest products, and again, those essential oils and fibres and so on. The area that we're focusing on is Danusha district in the south. Some of you will have seen that map before. It actually it gives an indication of the endemic rape and child abuse that's going on in Nepal, in South Nepal, those red regions. And I'd say I don't want to get into a discussion of that this evening. It's a very complex issue. But this is Lily's Leaves is focusing on one of these areas where rape is endemic. That is the aforementioned Lily on the right, kneeling, and she's looking at crafts that the women from these communities are making. And you see the people here, by the way, they look very Indian. They wear their saris and so on. Very colourful, like their artwork. And they have a lot of pre-existing talents in terms of they're weaving stuff like elephant grass, and they're producing baskets and cloths and so on. And the challenge for us is to develop these things and to design products that have an appeal, to a Western market, and also to Kathmandu Valley and so on. So we're working on that. Lily's partner in crime on the left is called Hasana Shrestha, and Hasana is a clinical psychologist. So it's a bit of an unusual combination, but not really given where they're working. That's the two of them without masks. Hasana, who you see on the right, has been visiting rape survivors in this area, and just trying to get an understanding of what we can do to help this community in a very broad sense. And this picture, I think, was taken a few weeks ago, and they're interviewing this young woman here with a social worker and a relative. It was interesting. I mean, Lily sent me a report the other day on what it was like, meeting these rape survivors and just how challenging it is, apart from all the emotional aspects that accompany that. And she wrote in her report, and I'll just read it actually. And she said, major challenge faced was language barrier. All the survivors we visited were from villages who understand and speak Maithili. That's the local language. In this part of Nepal, I think only 7% speak Nepali, which is a problem if you're trying to access services and training and education and jobs and all the rest of it. And then she continued, they understand and speak Hindi better than Nepali. Some of them don't even understand Hindi either. Number two, as soon as we reached the home of a survivor, all the neighbours would gather, making the environment not suitable to communicate properly. Even when requested kindly to move, they wouldn't. Number three, at the time we reached there, family members would receive phone calls from male family members from abroad to talk with us, or even from political leaders asking the reason for our visit. This made us to feel not safe at one point. Number four, the villages are very far away. You need to travel hours to meet survivors, and that limits the number of cases. And number five, in cases where the survivor and family were receiving threats, we were not able to visit because we didn't want to create more problem for the family from our visit. So it is a very threatening environment, lots of challenges. We just have to take this very gently, very carefully. I think you've got the same problem as you've got with rape since time immemorial, and that is this willingness or a pressure to cover it all up. Try and move the girl on, marry her off, etc., etc. And then things like access to justice, even if you can get over that hurdle, that's challenging as well. But we're looking at that. Say it's one step at a time. As far as this particular girl was concerned, we were able to offer her training in Kathmandu, because the other thing that Lily's Leaves is doing is running 6-month training courses in Kathmandu in both tailoring and silver jewellery. And this girl, who's 20 years old, was offered 6 months training, residential in Kathmandu, all costs covered, and she gets paid a small training allowance. She has to go and ask her father and her brothers for permission to do that. This is this very patriarchal society that they're in. And she, she was given permission to do that, so she'll be joining the next intake. So that's something that we can do, but there's so much more that needs to be done, and it's just a case of going at it gently. That is the training facility, and that's actually the hostel in Kathmandu, and that is absolutely palatial for the girls coming from South Nepal. And I think one of the things that shouldn't really be underestimated is just what an impact this will have on the girls, not just in terms of the skills that they will learn, skills for life, but just how their horizons will be broadened at being in the big city, where they'll be exposed to speaking Nepali on a daily basis, and all the other things that we'll be doing as well with non-formal education and so on. I mean, when they return to their communities, they'll return absolutely transformed, and they'll be quite significant people within their villages and so on, hopefully rolling out their training to other girls so that the girls don't have to come to Kathmandu in the future. I've got very good support from my daughter, Alicia Holmes. That was my daughter. I was very proud of her. She volunteered her £70 of her savings at Christmas to buy a sewing machine for that girl. And at the end of the girl's training, she will take that sewing machine back with her to her village as a gift from the charity. And that, with a small loan, will get them started. If the girl chooses to, she can stay on for a further 6 months of advanced training, and that would take her to a stage where she could get a very good job in a factory in Kathmandu with a very good income. But the choice really rests with the girl as to whether she wants to go back to her community or to carry on. I'm getting very close to the end. Just two or three things I want to flag up before I go. The first of the big gives this year will be on the 22nd of April, which is World Earth Day, and for 1 week only, all donations into that will double in value, and I'm on online donations, and I'm hoping to raise £50,000 during that appeal. I applied the other day for £25,000 of matched funding for that, and we'll see. We're actually off to a head start, if you'll forgive a pun, because earlier this month, a young girl, Nell, aged 15, she had her head shaven for the charity, and she raised a staggering £3,165, and she'll be putting that money into the big give, so it'll automatically double up. Getting more from less. Fantastic. Great example. In June, I'll be running a second big give, following on from the success of the big story last year, where I think we had 125 applicants for this writing competition. This year, it'll launch on the 8th of June. I'm reducing the number of words down to 800 because last year it was 2,500, which is not only a lot of writing, but it means a lot of judging, and in my case, a lot of editing of the films that fall out of this. So it's 800 words, and we've got a different subject this year. It's My Unsung Hero. So what I'm really looking for here is really, I suppose, a tribute to someone who has not been in the public eye. So not a sort of Captain Tom, rest in peace, fantastic guy. Maybe a relative, a teacher from childhood, someone within the community that is not in the public eye at all. And I'll do exactly the same with that as last year, in terms of we'll choose the winning entries, and I will convert those into films with the story being read by a celebrity. And a little word of welcome to Angela, who's on the call this evening. I think she was expecting this film. I'm not sure, Angela, if that's a pipal leaf you've got around your neck there, but if it is, it's very prescient of you. Angela's just joined us as our new trustee. I now have 5 trustees, all female, So it's keeping me nicely in check, and great job being done by all of them, 4 of them on the call this evening. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for being such wonderful people. And you'll see Angela on the website, by the way, right at the very end. She's doing a little piece to camera on why she's remembered Pipal Tree in her will. And so double thanks to Angela for that. And finally, a little word about Irene Hawken, who is the president of the Seroptimist movement in southwest England. And Irene was a runner-up in the big story competition last year. And for me, I have to say it was a personal favorite because she told this most remarkable story, very, very brave story of her experience growing up in a domestic abuse family environment as a child and the impact that had on her and her family. And it was incredibly courageous of her to tell that story. It was read by the actor Sagar Radia, and he actually, I could see he broke down at one point during the bit. I've got the link to that. If you haven't seen it already, just ping me an email tomorrow, and I'll send you the link to that. It's well worth seeing, and I think that's one of the nice things that came out of the big story last year. Not only did it raise a lot of money for us because the entry fee was paid into a big give, so it doubled in value. It was a lovely bit of creativity during lockdown for people who were, very isolated and so on. But I think the third thing was just some of the wonderful, wonderful storytelling that came out of it. So please give it a go yourselves this year. As I say, 800 words doesn't take that long, and let's see what we come up with. And I'm now open to questions.